Chapter 58. Monsieur Noirtier de Villefort. Here is what had happened in the Crown Prosecutor's house after the departure of Madame Danglars and her daughter, and during the conversation that we have just recorded. Monsieur de Villefort had gone to see his father, followed by Madame de Villefort. As for Valentine, we know where she was. Both of them greeted the old man, and after sending away Barrois, his servant for more than 25 years, sat down beside him. Monsieur Noirtier was sitting in a large wheelchair where they put him from morning till evening, in front of a mirror which reflected the whole apartment and allowed him to see who was coming in or going out, and what was happening around him, without attempting any movement. This was something that had become impossible for him. Motionless as a corpse, he greeted his children with bright, intelligent eyes, their ceremonious bows telling him that they had come unexpectedly on some official business. Sight and hearing were the only two senses which, like two sparks, still lit up this human matter, already 3/4 remoulded for the tomb. Moreover, only one of these two senses could reveal to the outside world the inner life which animated this statue, and the look which disclosed that inner life was like one of those distant lights which shine at night, to tell a traveller in the desert that another being watches in the silence and the darkness. Consequently, in old Noirtier's black eyes, under their black brows, black while all the rest of the hair, which he wore long and resting on his shoulders, was white. In his black eyes, as usually happens with any human organ which has been exercised at the expense of the others, were concentrated all the activity, all the skill, all the strength, and all the intelligence once distributed around this body and this mind. The gesture of the hand, the sound of the voice, and the attitude of the body may indeed have gone, but these powerful eyes made up for all. He commanded with them and thanked with them. He was a corpse with living eyes, and at times nothing could be more terrifying than this marble face out of which anger burned or joy shone. Only 3 people could read the poor man's language: Villefort, Valentine, and the old servant whom we mentioned. But Villefort rarely saw his father, indeed only when it was unavoidable, and when he did see him, made no effort to please him by understanding, so all the old man's happiness derived from his granddaughter. Valentine had succeeded by devoted effort, love, and patience in understanding all Noirtier's thoughts in his looks. She replied to this language, incomprehensible to anyone else, with all her voice, all her expression, and all her soul, setting up lively dialogues between the girl and this apparently dead clay, almost returned to dust, and which, despite that, was still a man of immense learning, unparalleled perception, and a will as powerful as any can be when the soul is trapped in a body that no longer obeys its commands. Thus Valentine had managed to solve the enigma of understanding the old man's thoughts in order to make him understand her own, to such an extent that it was now very rare, in normal circumstances, for her not to hit precisely on what this living soul desired or the needs of this near insensible corpse. As for the servant, he had, as we mentioned, been serving his master for 25 years and knew all his habits, so it was not often that Noirtier needed to ask him for anything. However, Villefort did not need the help of either one of them to engage his father in the strange conversation that was to follow. As we said, he was perfectly well acquainted with the old man's vocabulary, only boredom or indifference prevented him from using it more often. So he let Valentine go out into the garden, and he sent Barrois away, taking the servant's place on his father's right, while Madame de Villefort sat on his left. "Monsieur," he said, "do not be surprised if Valentine has not come up with us, and I have sent Barrois away, because the discussion that we are about to have is one that could not take place in front of a young girl or a servant. Madame de Villefort and I have something to tell you." Noirtier's face stayed impassive during these preliminaries, but Villefort, on the contrary, might have been trying to penetrate to the depths of the old man's heart. He continued, in those icy tones that seemed to brook no contradiction, "Madame de Villefort and I are sure that what we have to say will be agreeable to you." The old man's eyes remained blank. He was listening, nothing more. "Monsieur," Villefort continued, "we are going to have Valentine married." A wax figure could not have remained more indifferent to this news than the old man's face. "The marriage will take place within 3 months," Villefort continued. The old man's face still showed no emotion. Now Madame de Villefort spoke, and she hastened to add, "We thought that you would want to know this news, monsieur. In any case, Valentine has always seemed to enjoy your affection. All that remains is for us to tell you the name of the young man we intend for her. He is one of the finest matches to which Valentine could aspire, bringing her a fortune, a good name, and sure guarantees of happiness, given the manners and tastes of the man whom we have chosen for her. His name is not unknown to you. He is Monsieur Franz de Quesnel, Baron d'Épinay." While his wife was speaking, Villefort had been concentrating still more closely on the old man's face. When Madame de Villefort spoke Franz's name, Noirtier's eyes, which his son knew so well, fluttered, and their lids, opening as lips might do to allow the voice to pass, let out a flash of light. Knowing the public hostility that had existed between his own father and Franz's, the Crown Prosecutor understood this flame and the agitation it betrayed. But he pretended not to have noticed, and, continuing where his wife had left off, said, "You must accept that it is important for Valentine to be settled, as she is now nearly 19. However, we have not forgotten you in these negotiations, and we have been assured in advance that Valentine's husband, while he might not agree to live near us, that could be awkward for a young couple, but that you at least might live with them, since Valentine is so fond of you, and you seem to return her affection. In this way, you will not have to change any of your habits, except that you will henceforth have 2 children instead of 1 to care for you." The light in Noirtier's eyes was savage. Something frightful must surely be taking place in the old man's heart, and surely a cry of pain and anger was rising to his throat where, unable to escape, it suffocated him, because his face became purple and his lips turned blue. Villefort calmly opened the window, remarking as he did so, "It is very hot in here, and the heat is making Monsieur Noirtier uncomfortable." Then he came back, but did not sit down. "Both Monsieur d'Épinay and his family are pleased with the match," Madame de Villefort continued. "In any case, his only family is an uncle and an aunt. His mother died giving birth to him, and his father was murdered in 1815, when the child was barely 2 years old, so he is responsible only to himself." "A mysterious business," said Villefort. "The murderers have never been identified, although many people were suspected." Noirtier made such an effort that his lips almost contracted into a smile. "However," Villefort went on, "the guilty parties, those who know that they committed the crime and who may be subject to human justice in their lives and divine justice when they are dead, would be happy indeed to be in our place, with a daughter whom they could offer to Monsieur Franz d'Épinay to extinguish even the merest glimmer of suspicion." One might have thought it impossible for Noirtier's broken frame to achieve such self-control. "Yes, I understand," his eyes replied, with a look that simultaneously expressed both profound contempt and contained rage. Villefort interpreted the meaning of this look perfectly, and answered it with a slight shrug of his shoulders. Then he motioned to his wife to get up. "Now, monsieur," Madame de Villefort said, "please accept my regards. Would you like Edouard to pay his respects to you?" It was understood that when the old man meant yes, he would close his eyes. When he meant no, he would blink them repeatedly, and when he needed something, he would raise them upwards. If he wanted Valentine, he closed only the right eye. If he wanted Barrois, he closed the left. At Madame de Villefort's suggestion, he blinked vigorously. At this blatant refusal, Madame de Villefort pursed her lips. "So, shall I send you Valentine?" she asked. "Yes," the old man said, shutting his eyes tightly. Monsieur and Madame de Villefort took their leave of the old man and went out, giving orders for Valentine to be called. She already knew that she would have to attend Monsieur Noirtier during the day. She came in behind them, still flushed with emotion. It took only a glance for her to realize how much her grandfather was upset and how much he wanted to speak to her. "Oh, grandfather!" she exclaimed. "What is wrong? Someone has upset you, haven't they? You're angry?" "Yes," he said, closing his eyes. "Who has made you angry? My father?" "No." "Madame de Villefort, then?" "No. Are you angry with me?" The old man indicated yes. "With me?" Valentine said in astonishment. The old man again closed his eyes. "My dearest grandfather, what have I done?" Then, getting no reply, she went on, "I have not seen you all day. Has someone told you something about me?" "Yes," the old man's eyes said emphatically. "Let me think. In God's name, I swear. Ah, Monsieur and Madame de Villefort have just left, haven't they?" "Yes." "So it was they who told you whatever has made you angry. What can it be? Do you want me to go and ask them so that I can apologize?" "No, no," said the eyes. "You are frightening me. Heavens, what can they have said?" She thought for a while, and then exclaimed, "Ah, I've got it!" And, lowering her voice and coming close to the old man, "They spoke about my marriage, perhaps?" "Yes," the eyes replied angrily. "I understand. You are cross with me because I did not tell you. Oh, but you must understand, they insisted that I keep it from you because they did not say anything to me themselves. I stumbled on the secret as it were by chance. That explains my reserve with you. But forgive me, dear Papa Noirtier." The eyes became fixed and expressionless, seeming to reply, "It is not only your silence that pains me." "What then?" the girl asked. "Do you think I would abandon you, grandfather, and that marriage would make me forgetful?" "No," said the old man. "So they told you that Monsieur d'Épinay agreed that we could still live together?" "Yes." "So why are you angry?" A look of infinite pain entered the old man's eyes. "I understand," said Valentine. "Because you love me?" "Yes." "And you are afraid I shall be unhappy?" "Yes." "You do not like Monsieur Franz?" 3 or 4 times the eyes said, "No, no, no." "And this causes you great sorrow, grandfather?" "Yes." "Well then, listen to me," said Valentine, kneeling in front of Noirtier and putting her arms round his neck. "I too am very unhappy about it, because I do not love Monsieur Franz d'Épinay either." The old man's eyes lit up with joy. "Do you remember how angry you were with me when I wanted to retire to a convent?" A tear moistened the dry lid of the old man's eye. "The reason," Valentine went on, "was to escape from this marriage which was driving me to despair." Noirtier began to breathe more rapidly. "So you are unhappy at the prospect of this match? Oh, God, if only you could help me, grandfather, if only we could join forces to undermine their schemes. But you are powerless against them. even though your mind is so sharp and your will so strong. When it comes to a fight, you are as weak, or even weaker than I am. Alas, in the days when you had your strength and your health, you would have been a powerful protector for me. But now all you can do is sympathise, and either rejoice or mourn with me. That you can still do so is one last blessing that God has forgotten to take away with the rest. At these words, the depths of Noirtier's eyes were lit with such malice that the girl thought she could hear them say, "You are wrong. I can still do a lot for you." "You can do something for me?" she translated. "Yes." Noirtier looked upwards. This was the sign that meant he wanted something. "What do you want, grandfather?" Let's see." She racked her brains for a moment, expressing her ideas aloud as they came to her, but found that, whatever she said, the old man answered no. "Very well," she said. "We'll have to take more extreme measures since I am so stupid." And she began to recite all the letters of the alphabet, one after another, starting with A until she got to N, smiling and watching the invalid's face. At N, Noirtier indicated yes. "So," Valentine said, "whatever you want starts with an N. We are dealing with the letter N, and what do we want after N? Na, ni, ni, no. Yes, yes, yes," the old man said. "So it's no. Yes." Valentine went to fetch a dictionary, which she put on a reading stand in front of Noirtier. She opened it, and when she saw that he was looking attentively at the pages, she ran her finger up and down the columns. Over the 6 years during which Noirtier had been in his present unhappy state, the exercise had become so easy that she guessed the invalid's thoughts as quickly as though he had been able to use the dictionary himself. At the word notary, Noirtier signalled to her to stop. "Notary?" she said. "Do you want a notary, grandfather?" The old man indicated that this was the case. "So, shall I ask for them to fetch a notary?" Valentine asked. "Yes." "Ought my father to be told?" "Yes." "Are you in a hurry to see this notary?" "Yes." "Then I shall send for him at once, dear grandfather. Is that all you need?" "Yes." Valentine rang to the bell, called a servant, and told him to ask Monsieur or Madame de Villefort to come to her grandfather. "Are you happy?" she asked. Yes, I think you are, aren't you? Wasn't that quite easy after all?" And she smiled at the old man, as she might have done to a child. Monsieur de Villefort came in, having been fetched by Barrois. "What do you want, monsieur?" he asked the invalid. "Monsieur, my grandfather would like to see a notary," said Valentine. At this odd and unexpected request, Monsieur de Villefort looked at the invalid, whose eyes said yes with a firmness that indicated that, with the help of Valentine and his old servant, who now knew what he wanted, he was ready to hold his own. "You are asking for a notary?" Villefort repeated. "Yes." "Why?" Noirtier did not answer. "What need can you have of a notary?" Villefort asked. The invalid's eyes remained motionless, and consequently dumb, which meant, "I am sticking by what I have said." "You want to do us a bad turn?" Villefort said. "Is it worth it?" "But after all," Barrois said, and, with the obstinacy characteristic of some old servants, he was prepared to argue the point, "if monsieur wants a notary, that means he must need one. So I shall go and get a notary." Barrois recognized no master but Noirtier, whose wishes he would never allow to be challenged in any way. "Yes, I want a notary," the old man said, closing his eyes with a defiant air, as if to say, "Refuse me if you dare." "Since you are determined to have a notary, monsieur, you shall have one. But I shall apologize to him on my behalf, and you will on yours, because the scene will be quite ridiculous." No matter, said Barrois, I shall fetch him even so. And he left the room in triumph. Chapter 59. The Will. As Barrois went out, Noirtier looked at Valentine with a malicious interest that promised trouble to come. The girl understood the meaning of the look. So did Villefort, whose brow clouded with a dark frown. He took a seat, settled down in the invalid's room, and waited. Noirtier watched him with total indifference, but, out of the corner of his eye, he had told Valentine to wait and not to worry. 3/4 of an hour later, the servant returned with a notary. "Monsieur," Villefort said, after the usual exchange of greetings, "you have been requested by Monsieur Noirtier de Villefort, here present. A general paralysis has deprived him of the use of his limbs and his voice. Only we are able, with the greatest difficulty, to grasp a few fragments of his thoughts." "No, monsieur, I understand everything my grandfather says." "That's right," said Barrois. "Everything, absolutely everything, as I told this gentleman on our way here." "Monsieur," said the notary, turning to Villefort, then to Valentine, "and you also, mademoiselle, allow me to say that this is one of those cases where a lawyer cannot proceed, regardless, without assuming a dangerous degree of responsibility. For an act to have legal force, the first requirement is that the notary should be entirely convinced that he has faithfully interpreted the wishes of the person making such an act. Now, I cannot myself be sure of the approval or otherwise of a client who does not speak. And since, in view of his silence, I cannot be clearly persuaded that he wants something or that he does not want it, my functions would be exercised to no avail, indeed, illegally." The notary made to leave, and a faint smile of triumph appeared on the lips of the Crown Prosecutor. But Noirtier was looking at Valentine with such an expression of anguish that she went and placed herself between the notary and the door. "Monsieur," she said, "the language in which I communicate with my grandfather can be easily learnt, and, just as I myself understand it, so in a matter of minutes can I teach you to do so. Tell me, what do you need to satisfy your conscience?" "Whatever is necessary for our acts to be legally valid," the notary replied. "That is to say, certainty of the client's approval or disapproval. A person may attest when physically sick, but he must be mentally healthy." "Well then, monsieur, 2 signs will show you for certain that my grandfather has never been in greater command of his mental faculties than he is at this moment. Being deprived of voice and movement, Monsieur Noirtier closes his eyes when he means yes, and blinks them several times when he means no. You now have all you need to converse with Monsieur Noirtier. Try it." The look that the old man gave Valentine was so brimming with tenderness and gratitude that even the notary could follow it. "Have you heard and understood what your granddaughter has just said, monsieur?" the notary asked. Noirtier gently closed his eyes, reopening them a moment later. "And you approve of what she says? That is to say that the signs mentioned by her are truly those by which you make yourself understood?" "Yes," the old man repeated. "You asked for me to come?" "Yes." "To make your will?" "Yes." "And you do not wish me to leave without making this will?" The invalid blinked energetically several times. Apologies for the helicopter. "Very well, monsieur," the girl asked. "Do you now understand, and will your conscience be clear?" Before the notary could reply, Villefort drew him aside. "Monsieur," he said, "do you think that a man can endure a physical assault as severe as that experienced by Monsieur Noirtier de Villefort without also suffering some grave mental damage?" It is not exactly that which concerns me," the notary replied. "However, I do wonder how we shall be able to guess his thoughts in order to elicit a reply." You see, it is impossible, said Villefort. Valentine and the old man could hear this conversation. Noirtier was staring at Valentine so fixedly and with such determination that he clearly expected her to respond in some way. Monsieur, she said, don't worry about that. However difficult it may be, or may seem to you, to discover my grandfather's thoughts, I shall show you how it may be done, in such a manner as to dispel all your doubts on this head. I have been with Monsieur Noirtier for 6 years. Let him tell you himself if, in those 6 years, a single one of his wishes has remained buried in his heart for want of making me understand. No, the old man answered. Well, let's try then, said the notary. Do you accept the young lady as your interpreter? The invalid gave an affirmative sign. Good. Now, monsieur, what do you want of me, and what is the act that you would like to perform? Valentine went through all the letters of the alphabet down to T. At that letter, Noirtier stopped her with an expressive look. The gentleman wants the letter T, said the notary. That's obvious. Wait, said Valentine, then turning back to her grandfather, ta, T. He stopped her at the second of these syllables, so Valentine took the dictionary and, under the watchful eye of the notary, turned the pages. Testament, her finger said, instructed by Noirtier's eyes. Testament, the notary exclaimed. This is quite clear. The gentleman wants to make his will. Yes, Noirtier indicated several times. You must admit, monsieur, this is wonderful, the notary said in astonishment to Villefort. Yes, indeed, the latter replied. The testament itself will be still more wonderful, because I really don't think that the articles of this last will and testament will put themselves down on paper, word by word, without the clever inspiration of my daughter. And it could be that Valentine will have rather too direct an interest in the will to act as a suitable interpreter for Monsieur Noirtier de Villefort's nebulous desires. No, no, the invalid said. What? Valentine has no interest in your will? Monsieur de Villefort asked. No, said Noirtier. The notary was delighted by the results of the test and determined to dine out on this picturesque anecdote. Nothing, monsieur, he said, now seems simpler to me than this task which a moment ago I considered impossible. This will quite simply be a mystical, that is to say, one allowed for under the law provided it is read before 7 witnesses, approved by the testator in their presence, and sealed by the notary, also in their presence. As for the time involved, it will scarcely take longer than an ordinary will. There are, first of all, the usual formalities, which are always the same. As for the details, most of them will be supplied by the state of the testator's affairs themselves, and by you, who, having managed his estate, are acquainted with it. At the same time, to make this will unchallengeable, we shall make sure that everything is signed and sealed. One of my colleagues will serve as my assistant and, contrary to the usual practice, be present when the will is dictated. Does that satisfy you, monsieur? He continued, turning to the old man. Yes, Noirtier said, delighted at having been understood. What is he going to do? Wondered Villefort, whose eminent position did not allow him to show his feelings, and who, in any event, could not guess what his father had in mind. He turned around to look for the second notary, whom the first had mentioned, but Barrois, having heard everything and anticipated his master's wishes, had already left. So the prosecutor sent for his wife. A quarter of an hour later, everyone was assembled in the invalid's room, and the second notary had arrived. The two officials quickly agreed. Noirtier was read a vague and commonplace form of last will and testament. Then, to begin probing his intelligence, so to speak, the first notary turned to him and said, "When one makes a will, monsieur, it is in favour of someone." "Yes," said Noirtier. "Do you have some idea of the amount of your fortune?" "Yes." I am going to mention several figures in ascending order. Stop me when I get to the one you think is correct." "Yes." There was a kind of solemnity in this interrogation. Never had the struggle of mind against matter been more clearly visible, and the resulting spectacle, if not sublime, as we are inclined to call it, was at least curious. They formed a circle around Noirtier. The second notary was seated at a table, poised to write. The first stood in front of him and asked the questions. "Is your fortune greater than 300,000 francs?" he asked. Noirtier indicated that it was. "Do you have 400,000 francs?" the notary asked. Noirtier remained impassive. 500,000? Still no movement. 600? 700? 800? 900? Noirtier indicated, "Yes." "You have 900,000 francs." "Yes." "In property?" the notary asked. Noirtier said, "No." "In government bonds?" Noirtier said, "Yes." "And do you have these bonds in your possession?" A glance at Barrois sent the old servant hurrying out, to return a moment later with a small box. "Will you allow us to open this box?" asked the notary. Noirtier said, "Yes." The box was opened to reveal government bonds to the amount of 900,000 francs. The first notary passed them, one by one, to his colleague. The amount stated by Noirtier was exact. "Correct," the notary said. "It is clear that the man's intelligence is unimpaired." Then he turned to the invalid and said, "So, you have a capital of 900,000 francs, which, invested in this way, must bring you an income of round 40,000 livres?" "Yes," said Noirtier. "To whom do you wish to leave this fortune?" "Oh," Madame de Villefort said, "there can be no doubt on that score. Monsieur Noirtier only loves his granddaughter, Mademoiselle Valentine de Villefort. She has looked after him for 6 years, and this dedicated care has managed to win her grandfather's affection. I might even say his gratitude. So it is only fair that she should have some reward for her devotion." Noirtier's eyes flashed, as if to show that he was not taken in by this false consent that Madame de Villefort was giving to what she supposed to be his intentions. "Do you then wish to leave these 900,000 francs to Mademoiselle Valentine de Villefort?" the notary asked, thinking that he had only to write this provision into the will, but wanting, even so, to have Noirtier's consent, and to let it be noted by all the witnesses to this unusual scene. Valentine had stepped back and was weeping, her eyes lowered. The old man looked at her for a moment with an expression of profound tenderness, then turned back to the notary and blinked his eyes in the most emphatic way. "No?" the notary asked. "Do you mean that you do not wish to name Mademoiselle Valentine de Villefort as your sole heir and legatee?" Noirtier said, "No." Are you sure that you're not making a mistake?" the notary exclaimed. "Are you really saying no?" "No," Noirtier repeated. "No." Valentine looked up. She was astonished, not at being disinherited, but at the feeling with which usually dictates such an action. But Noirtier was looking at her with such an expression of tenderness that she exclaimed, "Oh, grandfather, I can see that you are only depriving me of your fortune, while leaving me your heart." "Oh, yes, indeed," said the invalid's eyes, closing with an emphasis that Valentine could not fail to understand. Thank you, she murmured. However, the old man's emphatic no had awakened an unexpected hope in Madame de Villefort's heart. She came closer to him and asked, "So, dear Monsieur Noirtier, are you leaving your money to your grandson, Edouard de Villefort?" There was a fearful blinking of the eyelids, almost expressive of loathing. "No," said the notary. "Then it is your son, here present?" "No," the old man answered. The two notaries exchanged looks of astonishment, while Villefort and his wife felt the blood rise to their cheeks, one in shame, the other in fury. "But what have we done to you, grandfather?" said Valentine. "Don't you love us any more?" The old man's eyes swept rapidly past his son and daughter-in-law to rest, with an expression of deep tenderness, on Valentine. "Well then," she said, "if you love me, my dearest grandfather, try to associate that love with what you are doing at the moment. You know me. You know that I have never considered your fortune. In any event, they say I am rich on my mother's side. Too rich. So explain yourself." Noirtier stared eagerly at Valentine's hand. "My hand?" she said. "Yes," said Noirtier. "Her hand!" everyone exclaimed. "There, gentlemen," said Villefort. "Now you can plainly see that this is useless and that my poor father is ill." "Ah, I understand!" Valentine exclaimed suddenly. "You mean my marriage, don't you, grandfather?" Yes, the invalid said 3 times, his eyes flashing each time the lid was raised. "You reproach us concerning the marriage?" "Yes, but this is absurd," said Villefort. "On the contrary, monsieur, if I may say so," said the notary, "but all this is very logical and seems to me to hang together quite perfectly." "You don't want me to marry Monsieur Franz d'Épinay?" "No, I don't want you to," said the old man's eyes. "And you are disinheriting your granddaughter because she is engaging in a match of which you do not approve?" the notary exclaimed. "Yes," said Noirtier, "meaning that without this marriage she would be your heir?" "Yes." At this, a profound silence fell over everyone. The two notaries looked questioningly at each other. Valentine, her hands clasped, gave her grandfather a grateful smile. Villefort bit his thin lips. Madame de Villefort could not repress a feeling of joy which, in spite of herself, showed on her face. Villefort was the first to break the silence. "But," he said at length, "it seems to me that I alone am able to assess the advantages of this union. I alone am master of my daughter's hand, and I want her to marry Monsieur Franz d'Épinay, so she will marry him." Valentine let herself fall, weeping, onto a chair. "Monsieur," the notary said, speaking to the old man, "what do you intend to do with your fortune, in the event of Mademoiselle Valentine marrying Monsieur Franz?" The old man did not budge. "You do, however, intend to bequeath it to someone?" "Yes," said Noirtier. "Someone in your family?" "No." "To the poor, then?" "Yes." "But you do realize that the law will not permit you to deprive your son altogether?" "Yes." "So you will only bequeath the share that the law authorizes you to dispose of outside your family?" Noirtier did not move. "You still want to dispose of the whole amount?" "Yes." "But after your death the will be contested?" "No." "My father knows me, gentlemen," Monsieur de Villefort said. "He realizes that his wishes will be sacred to me, and in any case he knows that in my position I cannot argue my case against the poor." Noirtier's eyes wore an expression of triumph. "What are you going to do, monsieur?" the notary asked Villefort. "Nothing. This decision has been taken by my father, and I know that he does not change his mind. Consequently, I am resigned. The 900,000 francs will leave our family and go to enrich some charitable foundation, but I will not give in to an old man's whim. I shall follow my conscience." At this, Villefort and his wife left, leaving Noirtier free to make his will in whatever way he desired. The last will and testament was drawn up the same day. The witnesses were sent for, and the old man gave his approval of the document, which was sealed in the presence of the witnesses and deposited with Monsieur Deschamps, the family lawyer. Ooh. Dun dun dun. Oh, we do like a good old contested will, we do. Did feel a little bit like charades, but drama indeed. Also, hello Diana. Big hugs to you. Hope you're doing okay. Thank you for being here, etc. But yes, that did feel like a game of charades, which kind of feels a bit mean to say, but but it's just like which letter? A, 3 words. Film, book. No, but yes, we shall take a break and see you back in about 5 minutes. Goodbye for now. we are back. Hello, hello. I hope we've all had a good break. Hope we've got some kind of beverage or snack. I've just had a square of chocolate myself, and I have a tea. And yeah, as like I was going to say actually, I'm honestly kind of impressed by the way Dumas is dealing with like Nortier being sort of shut in, as it were. Yeah, because like Lynn, you saying that this is very similar to this is exactly how you have to communicate with people who are mentally all there but physically just can't do anything. Which just there's quite a few bits in this story actually that I've just gone, that's interesting that Dumas is bringing this up and including it. And it's quite nice actually, because you don't tend to have, especially in the era in which this was written, you don't tend to have good representation of people with illnesses or people who are considered to be like dumb, in oldie speak. That you don't get a lot of representation that actually deals with that in the way of no, they are completely compos mentis, but they're just not able to communicate because they don't have any control over most of their body, because usually in a lot of this stuff they just go, oh, they're an idiot, put them in a mental asylum kind of thing, and it's quite nice to see Dumas approaching it with the actual kind of respect for the person, but obviously showing that the other people around him don't have respect for him apart from his granddaughter and servant. So it's like, okay, that's not bad. So I'm kind of glad that it's been put in, and yeah, again, the people who we're not meant to like are the people who are just being bad people about everything, including this. But yeah, like completely missing the point of well, I suppose that's another thing that him bringing up the fact that like Valentine knows Nortier so well that she very rarely misses the point. Just again, like, is quite a nice way of just illustrating the fact that you, as with anything, you learn someone's mannerisms and everything, and if you know them well enough, then it's slightly easier, not necessarily completely easy, but slightly easier to be able to communicate. So yeah. Also, good job, Nortier. That was quite a sneaky way of doing that. Turns out V4's just a bastard anyway. Not a very nice man, turns out. But yes, hope everybody had a good break. Diana, you didn't hear because you weren't here at that point, but we are one chapter away from the best chapter title I've ever read in a book, which I feel like you will appreciate. I mean, we'll probably get to that chapter actually, but chapter from now is How to Rescue a Gardener from Dormice Who Are Eating His Peaches. Like, Dumas, what? Like, every other chapter has been just like, isn't it great? It's so good. Every other chapter has just been like a one word or a name or something like that, or fairly dramatic or concise, and then he's just gone off on one on this. It's just like, just writing a little book about gardening and dormice. It's just a bit weird. So I'm really interested to see what's in that chapter. Thank you for the follow. And yeah, you do have to be on the same wavelength to think like the person. Yeah, exactly. But yes, on that note, let's get through the next chapter so we can get to finding out what's going on with the dormice. because all my chapters are too short, so I need to up my word count somewhere. Yeah, no. Any other book also, we're on page 669, just so everybody knows. Nice. Yeah, any other book, sure. But this is what? Like over 1,000 pages long? So no. Just no. Dumas was obviously having a bit of a day. So yes, let us continue. Oh, hang on a second. This is chapter 60, isn't it? Yeah. Bloody Roman numerals, I tell you. Chapter 60. The Telegraph. When Monsieur and Madame de Villefort returned to their own apartments, they learnt that the Count of Monte Cristo, who had come to pay them a visit, had been shown into the drawing-room and was waiting for them there. Madame de Villefort was too upset to go in directly, but went first to her bedroom, while the Crown Prosecutor was more sure of himself and proceeded at once towards the drawing-room. But, however successful he was in controlling his feelings and not letting them show on his face, Monsieur de Villefort was unable entirely to dispel the cloud from his brow, so the Count, greeting him with a radiant smile, could not help noticing his sombre air of preoccupation. "Good Lord, Monsieur de Villefort," Monte Cristo said after the first greetings had been exchanged. "What is wrong? Have I come at a moment when you were compiling rather too capital an indictment?" Villefort tried to smile. "No, Count," he said. "I am the only victim here. I am losing my own case, and the indictment was drawn up as a result of chance, obstinacy, and folly." "How do you mean?" Monte Cristo asked, with a perfect show of sympathetic curiosity. "Have you really suffered some serious misfortune?" "Oh, Monsieur le Comte," Villefort said with icy bitterness, "it is not worth mentioning. It is nothing, simply a financial loss." "Agreed," said Monte Cristo. "A financial loss is a trivial matter to someone who possesses a fortune and a philosophical outlook which are both as broad as yours." "Yes," Villefort replied. "It is not the money that bothers me, though, when all's said and done, 900,000 francs may be worth a sigh, or at least a snort of irritation. But I am chiefly vexed by the turn of fate, of chance, of destiny. I don't know what to call the force behind the blow that has just struck me, destroying my financial expectations and perhaps my daughter's future, because of the whim of a senile old man." "My goodness, what is this?" the Count exclaimed. "Did you say 900,000 francs? Even a philosopher might regret the loss of such a sum. Who has brought this upon you?" "My father, whom I mentioned to you." "Really, Monsieur Noirtier? But I thought you told me that he was totally paralyzed and deprived of all his faculties." "Yes, his physical faculties, for he cannot move or speak. Yet, as you see, despite that, he thinks, wills, and acts. I left him 5 minutes ago, and at this moment he is dictating his last will to 2 notaries." "So he must have spoken." "He did better than that. He made himself understood." "How?" "With a look. His eyes still live, and as you see, their look can kill." "My friend," Madame de Villefort said, coming into the room, "perhaps you are exaggerating the situation." "Madame," the Count said with a bow. In return, Madame de Villefort gave him her most gracious smile. "What is Monsieur de Villefort telling me, then?" Monte Cristo asked. "And what incomprehensible change of heart—" "Incomprehensible, that's the word," the prosecutor repeated with a shrug of the shoulders. "An old man's whim." "And there is no way of making him change his mind?" "Yes, there is," said Madame de Villefort. "It is entirely within my husband's power to ensure that the will, instead of being made to Valentine's disadvantage, is in her favour." The Count, seeing that the couple were starting to speak in parables, took on an absent-minded air, and began to give the most profound attention and the most marked approval to Edward, who was pouring ink into the bird's drinking dish. "Now, dearest," Villefort said in answer to his wife, You know that I do not enjoy playing the tyrant in my own home, and that I have never thought the fate of the world hung on my nod. However, it is important that my decisions should be respected in my family, and that the folly of an old man and the whim of a child should not be allowed to upset a plan that has been settled in my mind for several years. The Baron d'Épinay was my friend, as you know, and a match with his son is entirely suitable." "Do you think," Madame de Villefort said, "that Valentine might be in league with him? Consider, she has always been opposed to this match, and I should not be surprised if all we have seen and just heard was not the result of a plan agreed between the two of them." "Believe me, madame," said Villefort, "no one gives up a fortune of 900,000 francs just like that." "She would have given up the world since a year ago she wanted to go into a convent." "No matter," Villefort persisted. "I insist, madame, that this marriage should take place." "Despite your father's wishes?" Madame de Villefort said, changing to another tack. "That is serious." Monte Cristo pretended not to be listening, but he heard every word that was being said. "I have to tell you that I have always respected my father because, as well as natural filial feeling, I had an awareness of his moral superiority, and because a father is doubly sacred, both as our creator and as our master. But today I can no longer recognize any intelligence in an old man who is transferring onto the son what is nothing any more except a memory of hatred for the father. It would be ridiculous for me to subject my behaviour to his whims. I shall continue to have the greatest respect for Monsieur Noirtier. I shall accept the financial punishment that he is imposing on me without complaint. But I shall remain inflexible in my resolve, and the world will recognize that common sense is on my side. Consequently, I shall marry my daughter to Baron France d'Épinay, because in my view this marriage is good and honourable, and, when it comes down to it, because I wish to marry my daughter to whomsoever I please." "What?" said the Count, to whom the prosecutor had constantly been looking for approbation. "What? Do I understand that Monsieur Noirtier is disinheriting Mademoiselle Valentine because she is going to marry Baron France d'Épinay?" "Yes, by heaven! Yes, monsieur, that's the reason," Villefort said, shrugging his shoulders. "At least as far as one can see," Madame de Villefort added. "The real reason, madame. Believe me, I know my father." "Can you imagine such a thing?" the young woman replied. "I ask you, how can Monsieur Noirtier find Monsieur d'Épinay any less acceptable than anyone else?" "Indeed," said the Count, "I have met Monsieur France d'Épinay, the son of General de Quesnel, I think, who was created Baron d'Épinay under King Charles X." "Precisely," Villefort replied. "He seems to me to be a charming young man." "So it must be an excuse. I am sure of it," said Madame de Villefort. "Old men are jealous of their affections. Monsieur Noirtier does not want his granddaughter to marry." "But is there some cause for this hatred?" "Good Lord, who can tell? Perhaps some political antipathy? As it happens, my father and Monsieur d'Épinay did live through those stormy times, of which I only experienced the final days," said Villefort. "Wasn't your father a Bonapartist?" Monte Cristo asked. "I seem to remember you telling me something like that." "My father was a Jacobin more than anything else," Villefort said, driven to abandon his usual caution. "The senator's cloak that Napoleon threw over his shoulders only served to disguise the man, without changing him. When my father plotted, it was not for the emperor but against the Bourbons, because he had this fearsome quality of not struggling for some unattainable utopia, but only for what was achievable, and to attain that he would apply the terrible doctrines of the Montagne, which would shrink from nothing." "There you are, then," said Monte Cristo. "Monsieur Noirtier and Monsieur d'Épinay must have met in the political field. I believe that General d'Epinay, even though he served under Napoleon, remained a royalist at heart. Is he not the same who was assassinated one evening on his way home from a Napoleonic club, which he had been persuaded to visit by some who thought he shared their opinions? Villefort looked at the Count with something akin to terror. "Am I mistaken?" Monte Cristo asked. "Not at all, monsieur," said Madame de Villefort. "On the contrary, quite correct. And it is because of what you have just mentioned, and to extinguish this old animosity, that Monsieur de Villefort considered uniting in love two children whose fathers had been divided by hatred." "What a sublime thought," said Monte Cristo. "A generous thought, and one that the world should applaud. It would indeed be fine to see Mademoiselle Noirtier de Villefort become Madame France d'Épinay." Villefort shuddered and looked at Monte Cristo as if trying to read the deeper impulse that had inspired these words. But the Count's face wore only the same benevolent smile fixed on it, and try as he might, the Crown Prosecutor could not see what lay beyond that. "So," Villefort resumed, "although it is a great misfortune for Valentine to lose her grandfather's legacy, I do not see this as any reason to annul the marriage. I do not think Monsieur d'Épinay will be discouraged by this financial setback. He may realize that I am worth more than the money, since I am prepared to sacrifice it to keep my word. In any case, he will realize that Valentine has her mother's wealth, which is administered by Monsieur and Madame de Saint-Marin, her maternal grandparents, both of whom love her dearly." "And who deserve to be loved and cared for as much as Valentine has done for Monsieur Noirtier," said Madame de Villefort. "As it happens, they will be coming to Paris in a month, or less, and after such an affront she will be relieved of any obligation to stay constantly with Monsieur Noirtier, as she did before." The Count listened indulgently to the discordant cries of all these wounded vanities and damaged interests. Then, after a moment's silence, he said, "It seems to me, and I beg you in advance to forgive me for what I am about to say, but it seems to me that while Monsieur Noirtier may be disinheriting Mademoiselle de Villefort because she is marrying a man whose father he hated, he cannot find the same fault with your dear Edouard." "Absolutely, monsieur," Madame de Villefort exclaimed in a voice that defies description. "Is it not unjust, horribly unjust? Poor Edouard is as much Monsieur Noirtier's grandchild as Valentine. Yet if Valentine had not been engaged to France, Monsieur Noirtier would have left everything to her. What is more, Edouard bears the family name, but that does not alter the fact that, even supposing her grandfather really does disinherit her, she will still be 3 times as rich as he will." Having turned the knife in the wound, the Count listened in silence. "Come, Count," said Villefort, "come, I pray you, let us say no more about these family troubles. Yes, my fortune will go to enrich the poor. It is they who truly have the wealth nowadays. Yes, my father has denied me my legitimate expectations, and for no good reason. But I shall have acted like a man of sense and a man of heart. I promised Monsieur d'Épinay the income from that money, and he shall have it, however much I may have to put up with." "However," said Madame de Villefort, returning to the one idea constantly hovering at the back of her mind, "perhaps it might be better to confide all this in Monsieur d'Épinay, who can release us from the engagement." "Oh, that would be a disaster!" Villefort exclaimed. "A disaster?" Monte Cristo repeated. "Of course," Villefort said in softer tones. "A broken engagement, even when money is the cause, reflects very badly on a young woman. And then the old rumours, which I have tried to suppress, would become more plausible. But it won't happen. Monsieur d'Épinay, if he is a gentleman, will feel himself more firmly engaged than before by Valentine's loss of prospects, or else he would seem to be acting out of pure avarice. No, it's impossible." "I agree with Monsieur de Villefort," said Monte Cristo, looking intently at Madame de Villefort. and if I were a close enough friend to venture to offer some advice, I would suggest that he reinforces the engagement to the point where it cannot be undone, since Monsieur d'Épinay, as I understand, is about to return to Paris. In short, I should arrange for this marriage, which will do such honour to Monsieur de Villefort, to take place." Villefort got up, visibly overwhelmed with delight, while the colour drained from his wife's cheeks. "Very well," he said, offering Monte Cristo his hand. "That is all I was asking for. I shall take advantage of your excellent advice. So, let everyone consider what has happened here today is irrelevant. Nothing in our plans has changed." "Monsieur," the Count said, "unjust though people are, they will thank you for your resolve, I promise you. Your friends will be proud of you. As for Monsieur d'Épinay, even if he were obliged to accept Mademoiselle de Villefort without any dowry at all, which cannot be the case, he would be delighted to join a family whose members can rise to such a sacrifice to keep their word and do their duty." With this, he got up and prepared to depart. "Are you leaving us, Monsieur le Comte?" asked Madame de Villefort. "Madame, I must. I came only to remind you of your promise for Saturday." "Were you too afraid that we might forget?" "You are too kind, madame, but Monsieur de Villefort has such grave and sometimes such pressing obligations." "My husband has given his word, monsieur," said Madame de Villefort. "You have just seen that he will keep it even when he has everything to lose. So how much more when he has everything to gain?" "Are we to meet at your house in the Champs-Élysées?" Villefort asked. "No," said Monte Cristo. "This is what makes your compliance all the more praiseworthy. In the country." "In the country?" "Yes." "But where? Near Paris, I hope?" "Just outside, half an hour from the gates, in Auteuil." "In Auteuil!" Villefort exclaimed. "Of course I'd forgotten. Madame told me that you lived in Auteuil because she was taken into your house. Where in Auteuil?" "In the Rue de la Fontaine." The Rue de la Fontaine?" Villefort repeated in a strangled voice. "What number?" "Number 28. "So you have bought Monsieur de Saint-Marin's house?" Villefort cried. "Monsieur de Saint-Marin?" said the Count. Did that house belong to Monsieur de Saint-Marin?" "Yes," Madame de Villefort said. "And can you believe this?" "What?" "You founded a pretty house, I imagine, Monsieur le Comte." "Delightful." "Well, my husband has never wanted to live there." "Oh, I must say, monsieur, that I cannot imagine what your objection can be." "I do not like Auteuil, monsieur," the prosecutor replied, making an effort to control his feelings. "I hope that this dislike will not deprive me of the pleasure of receiving you?" Monte Cristo asked anxiously. No, Count. I hope I shall do all in my power. Believe me," Villefort stammered. "Oh, I can accept no excuses," said Monte Cristo. "I shall be expecting you on Saturday at 6 o'clock. If you don't come, I shall start to imagine that there must be, how shall I say, some dark superstition or some blood-stained tale connected with a house that has been uninhabited for more than 20 years. "I shall be there, Monsieur le Comte. I shall be there," Villefort said hurriedly. "Thank you," said Monte Cristo, "and you must please permit me to take my leave." Now, you did tell us that you have to leave us, Monsieur le Comte," said Madame de Villefort, "and I think you were even going to tell us why, when your train of thought was interrupted." "In truth, madame," said Monte Cristo, "I am not sure that I dare tell you where I am going." Come, tell us." "I am an idle fellow, I confess, but I am going to visit a thing that has often made me stop and stare for hours." "And what is that?" "A telegraph. There you are, I've said it." "A telegraph?" Madame de Villefort repeated. "Yes, indeed, the very thing, a telegraph. Often at the end of a road on a hilltop, in the sunshine, I have seen those folding black arms extended like the legs of some giant beetle, and I promise you, never have I contemplated them without emotion, thinking that those bizarre signals so accurately travelling through the air, carrying the unknown wishes of a man sitting behind one table to another man sitting at the far end of the line behind another table 300 leagues away, were written against the greyness of the clouds or the blue of the sky by the sole will of that all-powerful master. Then I have thought of genies, sylphs, gnomes and other occult forces, and laughed. Never did I wish to go over and examine these great insects with their white bellies and slender black legs, because I was afraid that under their stone wings I would find the human genii, cramped, pedantic, stuffed with arcane science and sorcery. Then, one fine morning, I discovered that the motor that drives every telegraph is a poor devil of a clerk who earns 1,200 francs a year, and instead of watching the sky like an astronomer, or the water like a fisherman, or the landscape like an idler, spends the whole day staring at the insect with the white belly and black legs that corresponds to his own, and is sighted some 4 or 5 leagues away. At this, I became curious to study this living chrysalis from close up, and to watch the dumb show that it offers from the bottom of its shell to that other chrysalis by pulling bits of string one after the other. So that is where you are going? It is. To which telegraph, the one belonging to the Ministry of the Interior or the Observatory? No, certainly not. There I should find people who would try to force me to understand things of which I would prefer to remain ignorant, and insist on trying to explain a mystery that is beyond their grasp. Come, I want to keep my illusions about insects. It is enough to have lost those I had about human beings. So I shall not go either to the telegraph at the Ministry of the Interior or to the one at the Observatory. What I need is a telegraph in the open countryside, so that I can see the fellow fixed in his tower and in his pure state. You are an odd sort of aristocrat, said Villefort. Which line do you advise me to examine? Whichever is busiest at the moment. Well then, the Spanish one? Exactly. Would you like a letter from the minister asking them to explain— No, not at all, said Monte Cristo. On the contrary, as I have just told you, I do not wish to understand any of it. As soon as I understood it, there would be no more telegraph. There would just be a signal from Monsieur Duchatel or Monsieur de Montalivet, en route for the prefect in Bayonne and disguised in 2 Greek words. What I wish to preserve, in all its purity and my veneration, is the creature with the black legs and fearful words. You must go then, because it will be dark in 2 hours, and you will see nothing. No, now I am worried. Where is the nearest? On the Bayonne road, I think. Then let it be the Bayonne road. That would be the one at Châtillon. And after that? The one at the Tour de Montelly, I think. Thank you. Farewell, I shall tell you on Saturday what I think of it. At the door, the Count met the 2 notaries who had just disinherited Valentine and were leaving, delighted at having completed a big piece of business that was bound to do them credit. Chapter 61. How to rescue a gardener from dormice who are eating his peaches. Not the same evening, as he had said, but the following morning, the Count of Monte Cristo left Paris through the gate at d'Enfer, set off down the Orléans road, and drove through the village of Lina without stopping at the telegraph, which, at the precise moment when the Count went by, was waving its long skeletal arms. Eventually he reached the tower at Montelly, which, as everyone knows, is situated on the highest point of the plain of that name. The Count dismounted at the foot of the hill and started to climb it by a little winding path, 18 inches across. When he reached the top, he was confronted by a hedge on which green fruit had come to replace the pink and white flowers. He soon found the gate into the little garden. It was a small wicket, turning on willow hinges and closed with a nail and a piece of string. He lost no time in discovering how it opened. He was now in a little garden, 20 feet by 12, enclosed on one side by the part of the hedge in which was set the ingenious mechanism we called a gate, and on the other by the old tower wreathed in ivy and strewn with wallflowers and stocks. Seeing it in this way, wrinkled and bedecked with flowers, like an old woman whose grandchildren have just been celebrating her birthday, it was hard to believe that it could have told many awful tales if its walls had a voice as well as the ears that an old proverb attributes to them. The garden was crossed by a path of red sand, bordered with a boxwood hedge, already several years old, and forming a contrast of colours that would have delighted the eye of Delacroix, our modern Rubens. The path turned back on itself to form a figure 8 in such a way as to make a walk of 60 feet in a garden of 20. Never had Flora, the youthful and smiling goddess honoured by Roman horticulturalists, been worshipped with such pure and meticulous devotion as she was in this little garden. Not one leaf on any of its 20 rose bushes bore a trace of green fly, and not a twig housed a little cluster of those aphids which gnaw and lay waste plants growing in damp soil. This did not mean, however, that it was dry here. On the contrary, the earth as black as soot and the dense foliage of the trees bore witness to a natural humidity, which could always be supplemented by artificial means from a barrel full of stagnant water at one corner of the garden. Here, on the green surface, a frog and toad had taken up residence, but always on opposite sides of the circle, with their backs turned to one another, owing, no doubt, to some incompatibility of temperament. There was not a blade of grass on the path, and not the shoot of a weed in the flower beds. No modish belle would clean and polish the geraniums, cacti, and rhododendrons on her china jardinerie with as much care as the person, still invisible, who looked after this little patch. Monte Cristo stopped, after closing the gate by attaching the string to the nail, and looked all about him. "It would seem," he said, "that the gentleman of the Telegraph has at least one full-time gardener, or else is himself passionately fond of gardening." Suddenly he stumbled over something behind a wheelbarrow full of leaves. The thing in question stood up with an exclamation of surprise, and Monte Cristo was confronted by a man of around 50 who had been collecting strawberries and placing them on vine leaves. There were 12 leaves and almost as many strawberries. As he got up, the man had almost knocked over the fruit, the leaves and a plate. "Harvest time?" the Count asked with a smile. "Forgive me, monsieur," the man replied, touching his cap. "I am not up there, I know, but I've only just come down." "Please do not bother on my account, my friend," said Monte Cristo. "Gather your strawberries while ye may, if there are still any left." "10 more," said the man. "I have 11 here, and there were 21 in all, 5 more than last year. It is not surprising. The spring was warm this year, and what strawberries need, monsieur, is heat. This is why, instead of the 16 I had last year, I have this year, as you can see, 11 that I have already picked, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Oh, my goodness! I'm missing 2. They were still here yesterday, monsieur. I know they were here, I counted them. It must be Mayor Simon's son who filched them from me. I saw him lurking around here this morning. Oh, the little devil! Stealing out of someone's garden? Who knows where he will end up?" "I agree," Monte Cristo said. "It's serious, but you must allow for the felon's youth and natural appetite." "Certainly, but that makes it no less irritating. However, I beg your pardon once more, monsieur. Am I perhaps keeping one of my bosses waiting like this?" And he looked apprehensively at the Count's blue coat. "Have no fear, my friend," the Count said, with that smile of his which he could make at will so benevolent or so fearful, and which now expressed only benevolence. "I am not a superior who has come to inspect you, but a mere traveller, driven by curiosity, who even now is beginning to reproach himself for coming and wasting your time." "Oh, my time is not very valuable," the man said with a melancholy smile. "However, it's the government's time, and I should not waste it. But I received a signal telling me I could take an hour's rest." At this he cast a glance towards the sundial, for there was everything in the garden at the Tower of Montlhéry, even a sundial. "And, as you see, I still have 10 minutes to go. Moreover, my strawberries were ripe, and if I had left them a day longer— Now, truly, monsieur, would you believe me if I were to say that the dormice eat them?" "Goodness, no. I should never have believed it," Monte Cristo replied gravely. They are not good neighbours, dormice, for those who do not eat them as the Romans did. Oh, did the Romans eat them? The gardener asked. Dormice? So Petronius tells us, said the Count. Really? They can't taste very good, even though people say plump as a dormouse. It's not surprising that they are fat, since they sleep all day long and only wake up so that they can spend the whole night gnawing. Last year now I had 4 apricots and they took one from me. I also had a nectarine, just one, though admittedly it's a rare fruit. Well, sir, they ate half of it on the side nearest the wall, a superb nectarine, with an excellent flavour. I've never eaten a better. You did eat it then? Monte Cristo asked. The half that remained, you understand. Delicious. Those little robbers don't choose the worst morsels, any more than Mayor Simon's son chooses the worst strawberries. Ha! But don't worry, the gardener continued. This is the last time it will happen, even if I have to stay awake all night guarding them when they are nearly ripe. Monte Cristo had seen enough. Every man has a passion gnawing away at the bottom of his heart, just as every fruit has its worm. The passion of the telegraph man was gardening. He began to break off the vine leaves that were hiding the bunches of grapes from the sun, and immediately won the gardener's heart. Did monsieur come to look at the telegraph? Yes, provided the rules do not forbid it. Oh, not at all, said the gardener. There is no danger, because no one knows or can know what we're saying. Yes, indeed, said the Count. I have even been told that you repeat signals that you do not understand yourselves. Indeed we do, monsieur, and I much prefer that, the telegraph man said, laughing. Why do you prefer it? Because in that way I have no responsibility. I am a machine and nothing more. As long as I work, no one asks anything more from me. Confound it, Monte Cristo thought to himself. Can I have fallen by chance on one man who has no ambition? Damnation, that would be too unlucky. Monsieur, the gardener said, glancing at his sundial, the 10 minutes are almost up, and I must go back to my post. Would you like to join me? You lead the way. They went into the tower, which was divided into 3 floors. The ground floor was unfurnished, except for some gardening tools leaning against the wall, spades, rakes, watering cans, and so on. The first floor was the man's usual, or rather nocturnal, home. It contained a few miserable household utensils, a bed, a table, 2 chairs, and an earthenware sink, as well as some plants hanging from the ceiling, which the Count understood to be beans and sweet peas, dried in order to preserve the seeds in their pods. They had been labelled with as much care as the work of a master botanist at the Jardin des Plantes. Does it take a long time to learn telegraphy, monsieur? He asked. Not in itself, but the apprenticeship is long. And how much do you earn? 1,000 francs, monsieur. That's hardly anything. But, as you can see, one is housed. Monte Cristo looked around the room and muttered, as long as one doesn't mind where one lives. They went up to the 3rd floor. This was the telegraph room. Monte Cristo studied each of the 2 handles which the man used to operate the machine. Very interesting, he said. But in the long run, doesn't this life become rather dull? Oh, yes. At first you get a stiff neck from looking, but after a year or 2 you get used to that. Then we have rest days and days off. Days off? Yes. When do you have those? When it's foggy. Ah, of course. Those are my holidays. I go down to the garden and plant, cut, or prune. In short, time goes by. How long have you been here? 10 years, with 5 as an apprentice, making 15 in all. And you are? 55. How long do you have to work to earn a pension? 25 years. And how much does it amount to? 100 écus. Poor creatures, Monte Cristo murmured. I beg your pardon, monsieur? I said that it was most curious. What? All this that you have shown me, but you understand nothing of your signals? Absolutely nothing. And you have never tried to understand? Never. Why should I? But there must be some signals addressed to you personally. Oh, those ones are always the same. What do they say? Nothing to report, take an hour off, or good night. That's perfectly innocuous, said the Count. But look, isn't your correspondent starting to move? Oh, yes, that's right. Thank you, monsieur. What is he saying? Is it something you understand? Yes, he's asking if I'm ready. How do you reply? With a signal that tells the telegraphist to my right that I am ready, and at the same time warns the one on my left to get ready in his turn. Very ingenious, said the Count. You will see, the man said proudly. In 5 minutes he will start speaking. So I have 5 minutes, thought Monte Cristo. More time than I need. Then he said aloud, My dear sir, let me ask you a question. Please do. Are you fond of gardening? Passionately. So what if, instead of a patch 20 feet long, you could have a garden of 2 acres? I should make it into an earthly paradise. And you don't live well on your 1,000 francs. Not very well, but I can survive. Yes, but you only have a tiny garden. That's true, the garden is not very large. And it's full of dormice who eat everything. They are the bane of my life. Tell me, suppose you were unfortunate enough to turn your head away when the telegraphist to your right started operating. Then I wouldn't see his signals. What would happen? I couldn't repeat them. And then? What would happen is that if I neglected to repeat them, I'd be fined. How much? 100 francs. 1/10 of your income, that's nice. Ah, well, the telegraphist said. Has that happened to you? Once, monsieur, once, when I was grafting a rose bush. Very well. Now, suppose you were to change something in the signal or to send a different one. That's another matter. I should be dismissed and lose my pension. 300 francs. Yes, 100 écus, monsieur. So you understand I would never do that. Not even for 15 years' salary? Come, it's worth considering, I think. For 15,000 francs? Yes. Monsieur, you are frightening me. Huh? Monsieur, are you trying to tempt me? Exactly. 15,000 francs, you understand? Please, monsieur, let me look at my correspondent to the right. No, don't look at him. Look at this. What is it? Do you mean you don't recognise this paper? Banknotes? Square ones, 15 of them. Whose are they? Yours, if you wish. Mine? The man cried in a strangled voice. Undoubtedly. Yours and no one else's. But look, monsieur, my correspondent to the right has started up. Let him carry on. You have distracted me. I'm going to be fined. It will cost you 100 francs. So, you see, it is in your interest to take my 15 banknotes. Monsieur, my correspondent on the right is getting impatient. He's repeating his signals. Let him. Take the notes. And the Count put the packet into the telegraphist's hand. Now, he said, that is not all. You won't be able to live on 15,000 francs. I shall still have my job. No, you'll lose it, because you are going to send a different signal from the one you receive. But, monsieur, what are you suggesting? Child's play. Monsieur, only if I were forced to. That is precisely what I intend. He took another packet out of his pocket and said, Here are 10,000 more francs. With the 15,000 you already have, that makes 25,000. 5,000 is enough to buy a pretty little house and 2 acres of land. With the remainder you can have an income of 1,000 francs. A garden of 2 acres? And an income of 1,000 francs. Good Lord. Oh, Lord. Take it, then. And Monte Cristo forced the 10,000 francs into the telegraphist's hands. What do I have to do? Nothing very hard. What then? Repeat these signals." Monte Cristo took a sheet of paper out of his pocket, on which there were 3 ready-prepared signals and numbers showing the order in which they were to be sent. "As you see, it will not take long." "Yes, but—" "And for this you will have nectarines and to spare." This was the telling blow. Feverish, red, pouring with sweat, the man sent the 3 signals he had been given by the Count, despite the wild gesticulations transmitted by the telegraphist to his right, who was quite unable to understand the reason for the alteration, and had begun to think that the nectarine man was mad. Meanwhile, the man to the left conscientiously transmitted the new signals, which finally made their way to the Ministry of the Interior. "Now you are rich," Monte Cristo said. "Yes," said the telegraphist, "but at what price?" "Listen, my friend," Monte Cristo said, "I do not want your conscience to suffer. So, believe me, I swear to you that you have done no harm to anyone, and that you have served God's will." The telegraphist looked at the banknotes, felt them, counted them. He went pale, then red. Finally, he hurried into his room to drink a glass of water, but he was unable to reach the sink and fainted among the dry beans. 5 minutes after the telegraphic signal had reached the ministry, Debray harnessed his coupé and hurried round to Danglars. "Does your husband have Spanish government bonds?" he asked the Baroness. "Yes, indeed he does. 6 millions worth." "Tell him to sell them at any price." "Why?" "Because Don Carlos has escaped from Burgos and returned to Spain." "How do you know?" "I have my sources," said Debray with a shrug of the shoulders. The Baroness did not need to be told twice. She hastened to tell her husband, and he in turn ran round to his stockbroker and ordered him to sell at any price. When people saw that Monsieur Danglars was selling, Spanish bonds at once began to fall. Danglars lost 500,000 francs, but he liquidated all his stock. That evening you could read in Le Messager, "King Don Carlos has escaped from house arrest in Burgos and has crossed the Catalonian border into Spain. Barcelona has risen to support him." Throughout the evening, everyone was talking about Danglars' foresight in selling his stock and the speculator's good fortune in losing only 500,000 francs on the deal. Those who had kept their Spanish stock or bought from Danglars decided they were ruined and spent a very unpleasant night. The next day, you could read in Le Moniteur, "Yesterday's article in Le Messager announcing Don Carlos's escape and a rebellion in Barcelona was without foundation. King Don Carlos is still in Burgos, and the peninsula is entirely tranquil. A telegraphic signal, misread because of the fog, gave rise to this false report." Spanish stock rose to double its price before the alarm. In actual losses and loss of profits, it meant 1,000,000 francs to Danglars. "Very well," Monte Cristo said to Morel, who was at his house when the news arrived of the odd reversal which had struck Danglars at the exchange. "I have just paid 25,000 francs for a discovery for which I would willingly have paid 100,000. "What have you discovered?" Maximilian asked. "I have just found out how to rescue a gardener from the dormice who are eating his peaches." And I think, on that bombshell, I think we shall end there. The next chapter is pretty short, but yeah, might save that for next time because I quite like how that ended.